First item is public comment. Do we have any public comment in the room? No. Do we have any on Zoom? Perfect. Next item is approval of the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Next is establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes?
There are two changes to the agenda. Proposing that we move items 3 and 4 to occur after item 7 on the agenda. So that's specifically moving the superintendent's evaluation item 3 and item 4, which is pro-con statements for the ballot proposition, to after item 7, which is a governance policy language review.
Perfect. I'll take a motion.
I move we move items, did you say 1 and 2? I'm
3
sorry,
and 3 and 4. 3 and
3
4.
and 4 till after agenda item number 7.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So first item on our agenda tonight is to talk about graduation ceremony recap. We'll let you start off.
I want to congratulate all of our graduates across our schools who accomplished a major milestone in their life, which is to complete their tenure in the Issaquah School District and to take the next step, which I think many of them very quickly did after graduation, into lots of different activities, celebrations, and really looking forward to the future. So I had a great opportunity to be at all the graduations and get to celebrate with the board, our team, our colleagues and students and families and caregivers. And it was it's just a powerful moment and a good reminder of all of the work that we do every day, all year, to prepare for these ultimate moments.
Hopefully you're able to enjoy the slideshow that you guys put together, and thank you for doing that before the meeting. We appreciate that.
Thank you to Jared Putney on the communications team for pulling that together. I also want to thank Jennifer Fitzgerald for her incredible work as the lead and point person on all of our graduation ceremonies.
Yes. So wanted to open up for any reflections from the board.
Sure, I'll start. First of all, it was just my first chance to get a share in the graduation ceremonies for the district, and it was just really a fantastic experience. And particularly enjoyed seeing the looks in almost all the kids' faces of just pure joy and pride, and well-earned accomplishment. So I very much enjoyed that. And it seemed like it all went off without a hitch, which there's a lot of work involved. So I was impressed by the logistics of it all. And also was really struck by all of our student speakers and faculty speakers, just how poised and poignant their point of view was. So found that particularly enjoyable as well.
Thank you.
I'll second Superintendent Taoyik's thoughts in thanking both Jennifer Fitzgerald and Jared Putney for their great work. During the ceremony, as I said to Jared this night, I saw him all over that field and under the stage, along the stage. She got some wonderful photos, as we saw from the slideshow there. And then Jennifer Fitzgerald, I mean, everything logistically went off without a hitch. And that is a lot when you're graduating that many seniors from a district our size. So huge kudos to them. I think I reflected on this with several of my fellow board members, but going through this first cycle and going through 5 of our graduations, starting with Gibson Eck the Friday before, and also our ACT graduation, and then moving into the 3 graduations at T-Mobile, it was really wonderful to see the depth and breadth of all that we provide here within the Issaquah School District. I don't think I really fully, I've always known that, but it was great to be able to fully see that across so many services and see our students graduate. So it felt very honored to be a part of that process and to be there through those graduations. So thank you. It's great.
Thank you. Any other reflections?
I just continue. It is the ultimate culmination of our mission. And so it is just so enjoyable to watch students from all levels, from all communities. And I love that they are able to express themselves in what they do when they're there. And I'm just truly, grateful to this community to provide educational opportunities for all our students.
So this was a special one this time. I love the graduations. I love all of them. It was particularly beautiful. I thought the Gibsonette graduation in Issaquah High School's theater. I don't know, that staging was just gorgeous. I thought that was awesome. ACT is always my favorite. And we have former Director Weaver here. She'll be happy to know that I was provided with tissues for the ACT graduation, as that was normally her job, to make sure I have my tissues whenever they do the I am poems at the ACT graduation. So thank you, Director Moraldo, for having my tissues ready. I think the only one I cried more at was obviously the Issaquah graduation. And funny enough, not in the moment, but in the morning doing my final proofread of speaking, I actually broke down into tears, which was glad I got that out versus during the graduation in the morning. But, truly an amazing experience each year to be able to see all the students go across the stage, to be able to see all the different sort of personalities of our different schools and all the different components of the ceremonies that are unique to them. It just really brings to life how special our community is each time. And certainly to be able to be there and speak at my own child's graduation is special, really a special moment. And I'm forever grateful for that. Grateful that she crossed the stage as well. So woohoo, that's awesome. And so I just, it was really, really special this time, not just because of the Issaquah High School one, but all of them. And I did get feedback at random teenagers still coming in and out of my house last night that I did good at the speech at their graduation. So I was like, oh, good. That's the cosign, I guess, you're looking for in all of it. So again, wonderful, wonderful time of year.
Yeah, I concur with shout out to Jennifer and Jared. And, I don't know how you pull that off so seamlessly. So it was incredible. Thank you, Superintendent, for recommending that we hand out the diplomas to the student representatives. That was also a neat moment, I think, in the graduations. So it was just a great moment to celebrate the breadth of what you oversee delivering for all the students and families in our district. So thank you.
And the entire communications team was on site that day, taking turns, capturing all the moments. Jared wasn't in charge of putting together the presentation for tonight to go, but it's Alicia Engels, Wendy Castleman, Kim Doherty, and Jared Putney, who are all on site to take photos and really have that be part of our archive to reflect the great work of our students and our staff.
Next item on our agenda is works in progress.
Great. So in the theme of recognizing where we are in the year, celebrations and recognitions, I have a couple of key and big moments to share with the board and the community. The first is around transportation, and this is something that we do get recognized on an annual basis in for many years by the Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and Washington State Patrol, around the excellence of our oversight and maintenance of our school buses. So we do there's an annual inspection basically of our buses, and our school district has again demonstrated exceptional results. And so for the past 2 years, the results in our district have been outstanding. So this is really about supporting our students being safe as they get transported to school and being able to not only attend school, but also engage in extracurricular activities. And so I want to know that this is particularly important right now to highlight. We did have 2 of our bus drivers recently pass away due to a tragic accident. So I just want to note that it is always nice to recognize the celebrations, but it's been particularly hard in the past week as we grieve the loss of 2 of our bus drivers in a very tragic way. So the next category of celebrations and recognition is in communications. So to continue the communications theme, And again, we have in the past received awards from the National School Public Relations Association, also known as NSPRA. And for 2024, they give out both publications and digital media awards. We won awards in a lot of categories, so I'm just going to count them. 5 different categories, and I'll share them out loud because I think they're worth noting. And this is Alicia Engel's final board meeting with us and her second to last day at work before she officially transitions. We will miss her and her leadership and her efforts to lead our communications efforts. And the first is in excellence in writing, and we received an award of excellence for an entry called titled "Hard Work Dedication Helped Issaquah High School Senior Overcome Obstacles." Another piece that we were awarded excellence for is the title of that piece is "Student Smile is the Best Part of Each School Day," according to a para. So that's the first category of excellence in writing. So it's not just that we are communicating with the families and the community with news updates or announcements. It's really storytelling as well about the great things that are happening across our district. In terms of the second category, it's about financial publication. And we got an award of merit for our monthly financial reports. That has been an effort where we have been significantly partnering to improve the visibility and transparency and readability and accessibility of that information to give our taxpayers and community awareness of where we are with our expenditures. For our newsletter, we received an award of merit for the Horizons publication as well. And then there's 2 categories for videos. The video series, which is produced in-house, an award of excellence for the community update series. So Robert Miller is really the lead driver of all these video efforts. And then we also got 2 other specific individual video awards for award of excellence. A voice mentor, questions with Kaylee, and then the Skyline Shooting Stars. So incredible set of recognition for the hard work and excellence in our communications team, but also with some of our teams that are across the district for support, such as our finance, budget, and operations teams as well. So that's pretty incredible. There will be a conference happening, I think, in about a week, 2 weeks, where our team will be attending. It's actually local here this year, and they'll be celebrated at that moment in time. The final category for me of sharing some exciting news is that the Washington School recognition program has been resumed, and it previously was known as the Washington Achievement Awards. And we've received some notifications about some awards that are for the 2021 to 2020 school year and the 2022 to 2023 school year. But basically, based on the school improvement framework for the state, schools are recognized for how they are closing gaps, their growth, and their achievement. And there are multiple measures that go into this framework, including the growth, achievement, and student success indicators that include attendance, completion of dual credit coursework, among others. So I want to congratulate the following schools for the I'll work backwards in time for the 2022-2023 school year for being recognized as part of this Washington School Recognition Program. And I'm going in alphabetical order. Briarwood Elementary, achievement for the whole school. Cascade Ridge Elementary, growth for 1 or more student groups and achievement for the whole school. Cedar Trails Elementary, achievement for the whole school. Same for Cougar Ridge Elementary, same for Discovery Elementary. Endeavor Elementary School, growth for 1 or more student groups. Same for Grand Ridge Elementary, and Sunny Hills Elementary was also awarded achievement for the whole school. We also had some additional, if they were not previously mentioned, awardees for the 2021 to 2020 school year. So Beaver Lake Middle School, growth for 1 or more student groups. Same for Challenger Elementary, Maple Hills Elementary, Maywood Middle School, Skyline High School, and Sunset Elementary, all again for growth for 1 or more student groups. So that's a significant number of schools being recognized for some really important work for overall achievement as well as gap closure, and making sure that we are providing a high level of excellence for all students, but also focusing on making sure that all students within the school are also achieving all the same levels. So some really exciting things to wrap up the year. And we will be doing more celebrations with those schools, and when we get, all the banners and additional information for how to support them. So that's it.
Thank you. That's gonna be hard to top. Good thing we have a break in our meetings, we'll remember, I guess. So, the next item on our agenda is monitoring report ends one mission.
Sorry. I move, we approve monitoring report E1 missions as presented.
Second.
Superintendent.
Great. I'd like to welcome Marcel Hauser, who is the primary point lead for our strategic plan efforts overall, and our priority lead areas for the 5 areas that are part of the strategic plan. And just to frame up a bit, we do have a presentation, but we'll kind of go through it quickly, not quickly, but we'll be concise because everyone can see what's been prepared and they can toggle at their own speed and pace to refer back to certain slides or to go deeper with information. But really, this is the first year of implementation that we've had with the strategic plan, which is an important part of how we are thinking about implementation monitoring for the district's goals, which are set by the board, including also the vision and mission specifically. So really our goal tonight is to make sure that we share our progress, reflections, how we're looking at the health of our system, and to hear board discussion on this direction, as it is the plan to help support the goal set forth by the board. So with that, I'll turn over to Marcel.
Marcel Hauser, Senior Advisor in Strategy. Good evening, everyone. And I'll move quickly through this. We've seen this before, we presented this, but just to anchor us in the conversation, our vision, newly formed vision, is our North Star. So the work of the strategic plan is aligned to that. And we want to highlight and really focus on the mission today. So we're going to key in on our district mission statement. It's a huge mission, right, to accomplish this. And we hope and we plan for the strategic plan to be the vehicle or the how to get to sort of this mission. So very huge mission, but we're working towards it, and we hope to share some highlights in terms of implementation year 1. Again, this is just, we've showed this before, just I was focused on the middle section and the bottom. So tonight we're going to share about our strategies a little bit, highlight from each priority area, and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps in our work streams as we go forward. And again, our last sort of like anchoring, I just would note on this, we're doing work to align everything we do to our ends, our missions. But we also know that in the ever-changing world, we have conversation. I think another board agenda item is around governance, changes to our policy. So we need to continue to think about how we better align the strategic plan. So this is not a one-time thing. The main thing I would say is we need to look at this again after changes come in the year to come. So lessons learned. So this is, I do love to talk about this. So I love continuous improvement and like, what did we learn going through the process? I would highlight, and I will try to be brief. Honestly, I do love relational. I love to talk. So I love to share with folks. But I will go quick and I will share that the key thing that I think the plan and really the work this year shared with us was the cross collaboration between departments. I think if I had to point out anything here, it's the fact that we worked across departments. You had people without positional power over other folks directing work and sharing work. So that was in itself, to learn how to do that and to push work through a system without having that positional evaluative power is challenging. So it's a capacity building skill. I would say we all learned this year. And then the last piece I would say is there were other folks that aren't in leadership. Maybe they're not in senior leadership or cabinet that, took a leadership position in regards to the strategic plan. So there was a ton of capacity building, training, conversations where I think we've built sort of capacity and grown leadership in the system with the strategic plan year 1. With any benefit, there's always opportunities where you go, we could do this better. So this year was no exception. A couple of key things. I think data is a big piece. How do we report data? How do we analyze data? And how do we come out and just tell a story involving our data? And then key in on the key things we want to talk about. Like, is it working? Is what we're doing working? How do we analyze that quickly and then report back out to the board and community? So that's a big piece that we learned. Then we also learned, and we talked a little bit about this in the work study, how do we continue to align to our SIP plans and our building level plans? We have to continue to do that and think about how is what we're doing connecting back to the teacher who's working with a student in their classroom? Those are the key sort of opportunities, but as we go, there'll be more to come as we continue to move through the plan. With that, so I'm going to invite some folks here to share, and they're going to share maybe a bullet from each area and the key highlight that they saw related to the work. Tonight, we're going to start with student well-being. So Shereen Carver would come to the mic. And there's a lot of tons of highlights to share. So it's hard to limit it to one, but we will do our best. Yeah.
That's Marcel's attempt to kind of keep me short and sweet. I want to start with gratitude first and foremost. I want to thank the P1 or the student wellbeing strategy leads, all of our strategy team members, all of the staff that work every single day focused on student well-being, and of course, our community partners. So just wanted to start there because student well-being is the heart of what we do. So I want to start there with gratitude. A couple of the key highlights, we're incredibly proud of our full system rollout of our social, academic, emotional behavior risk screener, otherwise known as SABRS. Wanted to make sure I said it all the way out. And My SABRS is a universal screener for us really to think about how we're thinking about well-being for our students, and also our focus on student well-being. And in that partnership space, moving forward with Care Solace, community and schools. And then we also encourage all of our communities to come out to our community fair at the beginning of the year to really focus on connecting you with resources and getting ready to kick off school, including haircuts and school supplies. So those are a couple of highlights.
Academic opportunities. Next slide, please. Does it? Thank you. Has been exciting to watch, and the team who works on academic opportunities has really noticed all year how woven they are to each other. So getting the strategy leads together has allowed them to be like, oh, that relates to my work as well. It's allowed a champion for some projects that have been on the COVID side burner, and they are moving forward with steady steps and intentional focus. I'm bringing forward two of the exciting, they're all exciting to me, but two of the things that will be the most visible change next year. One is a change in the high school and beyond plan that we're moving it to teacher-led lessons starting in 7th grade. And so by the time the students get to high school, we hope we have thwarted the do everything 2 weeks before you graduate path, and that the course selections along the way do help students align and their parents have a chance to talk with them about it, about aligning their course selections to their desired post-secondary goals. And the second one is the changes in the curriculum adoption with an equity lens, and to bring parents in the community into the adoption process much sooner, so that we involve our community and vested partners in the adoption of curriculums going forward. Thank you.
Hi there, Donna Hood, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And of all of the work that we've done in the area of diverse talent, I think tonight I'll highlight for you our STAY survey results. We're very pleased. New this year, we gathered some STAY survey input from all staff. We had over 1,100 respondents, which is pretty good considering it was February. It was that dark, rainy month, and people still answered us. I think they wanted a place to talk about how they experience us as an employer. There were some really great celebrations in that data. About 92% of the respondents said they are satisfied or very satisfied with how they experience their coworkers. Another 91% said they're satisfied or very satisfied with the teamwork they experience with colleagues. And wages and compensation also scored high on that list. Lots and lots of good information here. It's been shared with the Equity Advisory Committee, with Cabinet, and with all administrators, so that they can really be thinking about how staff are experiencing them and their own buildings as a workplace, also leading into August and into the fall experience.
Feel like it's a parade. I'm Sherry Cox, Executive Director of Secondary Education, and I oversaw authentic engagement. And I think one of the big takeaways for me is, as I'm sitting with Jameson and Marcel, who are my strategy leads for this, we kept saying authentic engagement, and I stopped and was like, do we even have a common definition? Is what I think and you think all the same in this district? And the answer was no. So we backed up way back from our goals, and we got a few red dots in our goal charts because we needed to just go back and settle on authentic engagement. And one of the things that we're still in the process of is socializing that. And so I'm hopeful you'll soon see what we land on as an idea around what we define in this district as authentic engagement. And there's a bunch of other great things to highlight there, but that was a big learning for, I think, our team.
Hello, Martin Turney, Chief of Finance and Operations, and my area here was organizational effectiveness. So we had two strategies. The first one had to do with continuous improvement. And so a big part of that was learning more about it and getting ourselves trained up. So Alicia Ingalls actually was able to reach out to the state auditor's office, who provided free training for us, which was excellent. I like the free training myself. So that was great. So we got some training and started to use the tools, right? So we had a couple opportunities with the language access program to try out these new tools that we were learning about. And then we also got to expand upon that a little bit in the bond advisory committee work that we did. And as we went along with the meetings, we got to fine tune things by utilizing some continuous improvement techniques. And then 5B had to do with equity-based budgeting. And so Mariah Banasek was able to take the lead on that and get an internal work group together, also working with some outside consultants and kind of wrestling with, what might this look like for our district. And so just getting through the first year and figuring out, what could an initial framework look like that we could bring forward and kind of continue to tweak as a district to see what might work best.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, so the next piece is we wanted to pull together some key indicators for system health, because you can do a lot of the implementation type of works and the things that you're doing, but what are we tracking holistically? So this was our attempt this year, and I won't read everything here, but I'll just highlight sort of how we looked at it. So we thought about student sort of like centric outcomes related to students. So you'll see like graduation is a culminating sort of high level outcome. We did want to make sure we put third grade reading in here, even though that feeds into that, but it's a key sort of moment in time for students. The other piece is we added in some data related to staff. So Donna spoke to it, our stay survey, we're starting to send that out. How does staff feel when they're at work? So we can disaggregate that data by different identity markers. And then we also wanted to think about our family. So what's a data point that we're sending right now? So through our EVP process, we have a question related to how families are feeling, how they would grade the district. Although I wouldn't say every question we asked is perfect, but we have a starting point to say, how are folks experiencing the district? How do they feel about us related to customer service and beyond? So that's just a highlight there. And just the next slide, we just want to talk about next steps, and then we'll open up for questions. So next steps, we're going to continue to work on some of the strategy work plans. That's year 2. So we shared a little bit about this in the work study. We talked about next steps. So we're expanding on that. One piece of input is in August, we'll have our board retreat, but we'll also have a retreat with our administrators where they'll be able to provide input into those year 2 milestones and year 2 work plans. And then the other piece is we want to continue to create deeper alignment with our SIP plan. So that's just how do we make sure we're talking to teachers, we're talking to staff, and they see themselves in the work. So those are some immediate next steps. And with that, I will open up to the board for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. And I thought that was a really well orchestrated parade. So we really appreciate that. So just to frame this, we had an hour before the meeting of work study session, and I appreciate your team and all the preparation that went into it. And I thought we had a really rich discussion. So rich that we only got through the first 2 of the 5 priority areas. So I imagine the next 3 will come up more vigorously than the first 2, but wanted to open up for any questions and comments. And Stephen, while we're doing that, if you would actually switch to the ends 1 mission final PDF, so we can refer to that and a page number if we need to toggle to it, just so people have reference. Director Taylor.
Yeah, I'll start actually with this kind of very general comment because to the point, right? Ends one, this is, and the strategic plan, this is everything. This is so much of the work. And we can be here for hours talking about all of the work, and we are here every other week talking about all the work. So, and there's lots of great stuff in here. I wanted to touch on though, actually a step back, which is I think the ends report itself would benefit from a statement up front about the plan, the strategic plan itself. And is there a thought, is it working? You know, there's been so much work put into the plan itself. You know, what have you learned from the plan as a vehicle in doing or managing the work for the district? I think that would be very, very helpful. I also think it would be great for our community if we up-leveled or had a statement up-leveling from the plan in the beginning about, hey, these are the thematic issues or opportunities that we're working on in the district. Here are the big buckets. And here are the major work items that we're doing to work on those things, because the strategic plans so much of it is about transparency to our community. And so the community knows that the work that we're doing. But I do think there is so much detail in the plan. We need a little help in like saying, these are the big issues. That's just one takeaway. I just kind of wanted to set the stage with before we get into the particulars.
Thank you for that feedback.
Great. Anyone else want to kick us off?
I'm happy to. So thank you for the presentation. I particularly just want to call out the sharing of the learnings, the opportunities. I think that's just helpful to get out, right? We don't get it all right. It's a lot of road to cover. And so I appreciate doing that self-reflection or very large group reflection to come up with those. The other thing that jumps out from a breadth level of what you went through was I really like seeing the use of external resources, reaching out, especially the free ones. That was great. But reaching out for external guidance, for acceleration, to augment the knowledge base within the team, because I think that's just always helpful as we're looking at how to grow and improve. So I guess those are things I'll add from a top line perspective. And then in the sections we covered, maybe I'll just hit them. The couple things that certainly jumped out to me in our earlier conversation was around, I think you covered it there at the end, about some of the ways of connecting with the community, and that EVP, I wasn't aware of some of the questions that we're asking during the registration process to understand need, particularly going toward that student well-being item. And so I think that that's really great that we're getting a sense from the community of what programs may be needed. Obviously, we're doing that throughout the school year as things are presenting. And then, there's a section in that student well-being that's around safety and security. And there's so much good work going on in that area. We've even just recently approved some funds to work on now for additional security items. I think we had a great conversation in the work study about how do we put more of that on display for the community so they can understand the continuous focus in those areas. So those are my couple starting thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Dr. Taylor.
I'll just share some top level thoughts on it. And Marcel, I was kind of pulling out and highlighting some of the things that really resonated with me. One is the cross collaboration across departments, biggest area of success. And like you said, pulling in leaders from different facets to really lead these efforts and working together. And so applaud that. I think that was wonderful. And I think in any strategic plan, it just shows the strength of that. So appreciate your work around that. You also said too that I love is how do you leverage the data to tell a story? I think that's always important, and I'm seeing that from the strategic plan. And then lastly, I loved how you said too around talking with administrator staff to see how they see themselves in the work, which obviously is important. And I think that's going to be a big part of this. So appreciated that as well. So thank you. Good work.
Dr. Quinn, you can keep going if you would like. I'll welcome more.
That's everything. Well, hey, I'm relational too, so it could be all night.
I know.
So yeah,
Yes, it can.
Well, I think I do appreciate I don't know, we've probably said it already, but this is the first time we have monitored our mission. And I've been on the board for 15 years. The policy has been around for longer than that. So I do think that the process that we've gone through over the last 2 years, putting together a strategic plan, saying this is really how we answer the question of being able to monitor this, one, and all the work that's put in this. I think for me, what really stands out when I look overall at the system is that there's a small group of words that's a huge chunk of work.
Mhm.
And so it's really hard to evaluate, and you start to peel back the layers. But what I'm seeing so often throughout the document is we found this, we recognize this, we're making changes here. That was the whole point. And so I really appreciate that this is a guiding tool on directing what we're going to do. Otherwise, it just ends up being well, we'll try this, we'll try this, but it's much more strategic, which is the whole point. So I think that's what I got, the overall feeling that there was some strategic work going on, focusing on item that we want to look at, what's currently going on, what are we doing to address that, and what are our plans for next year. So I think I really, from a top down, that's the kind of document I need, and I really appreciated this.
Yeah, and building on that, that we're monitoring this at the end of our school year, and it includes a whole column throughout about reflections. I think it's really, really helpful to us to see, because this is where we get to see details and ask questions about things that we haven't seen. That, to Director Moraldo's point, there's a lot of work behind accomplishing that sentence on the wall. And so I really appreciate the reflections as well as the looking forward. So, initially a superintendent and I had a conversation like, does it belong here in June? And I think firmly by seeing this is where it belongs. And it's a great culmination of all the hard work that you guys do every day that gives us a sense. And I really appreciate the rich discussion we had prior to that. So I wanted specifically, since we had an opportunity to talk about the first two, wanted to move to the third one. If anyone had specific reflections, we'll kind of like switch back into finishing our work study conversation. So because I think it's really helpful for a cabinet to hear, or superintendent to hear any sort of specific board reflections. And we talked about 1 and 2, so wanted to move to 3. So Director Moraldo.
Mine's just really quickly. So as you were talking about the evaluation of especially those that, as far as salary. So the evaluation of the teachers, how are they feeling? My one question around that, and it's very detailed, is around new teachers and their reflection on their salary. Is that different than teachers who have been here 20 years, that are different on the pay scale? Because I have a rising concern about the first couple of tiers and how they are feeling in comparison to the cost of living in this area.
We can absolutely check that out. I didn't break it down that way for the purposes of kind of sharing out with the administrators, but we did ask them about their years in the district and years in teaching, so we could break it down that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other reflections on 3? And Steven, you can move to the top of page 10, which shows summary. Okay, we'll keep going. Any for 3?
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that your reflection, since you were forced to pick one, I love that your reflection was around the stay survey, but I think it is worth commenting on the amount of focus that has gone into recruiting and hiring additional staff of color, and the manager training, the approach to hiring differences, the places you've gone to source candidates, the resources I know you've worked on to share with candidates on what's available here in our district for candidates to feel supported moving into our area. And, it's one line, but there's so much behind that one line. And I think it certainly matters. And we've seen that in other conversations. It matters that our students see people that look like them, that are reflected of them. And so it's so wonderful to see the hard numbers move after all of that planning and process and training changes. So I wouldn't want to leave this section without hitting on the pure numbers that you share here are impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting those. Yeah. Director Taylor.
If, Stephen, if we could actually go to page 12 on the document, I wanted to highlight the create pathways for internship and mentoring for those in our trade. I was doing a school visit with Superintendent Tao Yik a couple weeks ago, and we were talking to an individual who actually had gone through this particular program, and it was really exciting to hear. I mean, her excitement around it. So, you know, the continued engagement with Central Washington and also with Seattle Pacific University, you know, to support individuals to move into the teaching profession and get that teaching certification. And it's pretty cool, that work that's being done internally as a district. And after hearing that individual, I've been touting that a lot with people in the community. Pretty cool stuff. And I know that many of you helped to make that happen, particularly Dana Bailey too. So if there are others, I want to make sure I'm recognizing them. I know it was Dana, but
Dana was huge.
Yeah.
Carlina also helped because she is the master behind the scenes when it comes to figuring out parapro schedules.
Yeah.
And making all of that actually technically and operationally work. And that's been super important. Her expertise has been very helpful. We're only in year 1 of 2 with this block grant. So I'm very glad you're out there telling people about it.
Yeah.
Because we will be seating more folks next year. They've been a great partner. We also have a third partnership that we were just approved for. There's some budgetary things we have to work out for school year 25-26, but we're excited about also becoming a WEA teacher residency district.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff. I think really something I want to highlight for our community. Again, this idea of I've always envisioned people listening in to us. Maybe they are. And if they are, this is pretty cool stuff. That sets us apart from other districts. So I want to make sure people see this.
The support is also pretty monumental. I did the math myself. The folks who are in that SPU block grant program are paying less for their endorsement and credential than I did in 1999.
Wow.
So all in, it's an incredible deal for them, and I'm very, very happy for them.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board reflections on first talent? Okay. Moving on to authentic engagement. So Stephen, if you just move to the key highlights, should be a page or 2 down for authentic engagement. Keep going to key highlights. Thank you. So Director Coyne, you wanted to kick off this one? So please.
Just another area I wanted to highlight, sorry. But I want to emphasize this, particularly the 125 empathy interviews. I know we talk about that a lot, but I wanted to see if you could just briefly go into kind of high level, what does that entail? Because I know it was obviously a lot of time. It was talking to obviously students, families, staff. Could you give a little more detail on that? You don't mind?
Sure, I can share as part of the process. So an empathy interview is a one-on-one sort of in-depth interview where you're deeply listening to a person. So you have some open-ended questions. So you may have an open-ended question. Somebody starts to share, and then you're really probing deeper with a follow-up question to get to that deeply unmet need or emotion underneath. So it's a skill. It's easy to learn sort of the concept of it, very hard to implement and do it. It's to listen that deeply takes a lot of energy. So the 125 is no small feat to get that many interviews cross-coordinated across the system. And then also I would say the follow-up piece, we don't list it here, but the analysis of all that data, over 1,000 quotes where you're pulling those things down and honoring every word that came from those 125 people to make sure that stuff is actionable. It's very challenging. So a lot of work went into that, and very proud of like what we're going to continue to do with that information that we learned.
Yeah, great work. Thank you.
I will add 2 things to that. One is we had over 40 individuals participate in conducting those interviews. And so it is very time intensive to conduct an interview, but also to follow up from that and to think about what you heard and to pull out key quotes or themes from that particular interview that gets then reviewed by in tandem with other quotes. So it really was a huge effort also of across the system, but it then created capacity for individuals to be able to say, I can do maybe 5 empathy interviews about a certain topic, about why are students, either not coming to school, or how do I better understand the experience of this part of our, student population. So many individuals who were part of the interview team are conducting their own interviews to go deeper into a specific aspect of the programmatic work.
I do think though there's a cautionary tale that if we don't do something with all of the data that we've collected for these people, they're not going to want to participate again. And so we have to be very careful and mindful that we take action on what we hear and that we report back to the folks that we talk to about maybe some things we can do based on what we heard and some things that we're not going to be able to do. Well, it's a great idea. It's maybe just the not yet.
When would you envision and how would you envision doing that sort of closed loop part?
Yeah, so Julia Bamba's really kind of taken the lead on some of this work around the empathy interviews, and that's a great question, Director Gellinger. But like I can tell you that in our last two all admin meetings, Julia has led some pretty impressive work around here are like students not safety but well-being. Here are some quotes that we heard related to the topic of well-being. Either that we're doing it or not doing it and what the kids are telling us. And so principals actually sat around with colleagues and created this huge brainstorming about, okay, so here's what the students are telling us, or here's what the families are telling us. And so what can we do in our school at the beginning of the school year to act on this information? And so we want to make sure that we are acting on what's being shared with us. And then I don't know if you have anything else to add. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins.
I may say something controversial now, so I don't know if it is or it isn't. But
Trigger warning.
what I wonder about this piece, and I'm just going to reflect on being in this seat now 5 years, when you were commenting around having open-ended questions and what's the next probing language. I think there's something in here that maybe we could work on. I know we've done a board video series, and maybe this is something we could talk about. Is one of the things I would love to figure out, and maybe it's hopefully something you're gleaning in your process, is how to help people give feedback. I find it incredibly difficult. This may be the controversial part, is sometimes people get so fixated on a point that they want to make that they miss giving, at least for me, the information that would be helpful in helping them. And even sometimes we've had some recent town halls or some recent sessions where I try to help people like, hey, I'd really like to know this, but they want to go back to their talking point so badly. I'm like, I swear to you, if you could answer my question, I probably could be a lot more helpful of what to do next. And so I think there's something about you're probably learning in this process about how we can all be in better conversation with each other. That if we could bottle up a little, I think could help the process. Because I know and I feel sitting in this seat, particularly when people come to that podium, that there's something they desperately want me to do, and I'm personalizing the language. But it can be really hard to sort through what that is at times. And so I don't know if that's just me sharing the things I think about, but there's, I think, something about how are we better in conversation with each other. I wonder if there's something out of your process that we could kind of illuminate, because I swear my goal is always to be helpful. It can just be super hard sometimes when people get hard fixated on what they believe is the point.
I think one of the differences, so yes, because once we get into more of a stance of inquiry, it actually unlocks more information about what might be underlying. So the empathy interview is designed to not jump to action right away, because then that sometimes means that the individual that you're in a relation, it should be a relationship with the person there. It's giving them an opportunity to go deeper and deeper, so they can kind of identify maybe, oh, this actually is something unlocking for me through this sharing of information response. So it's balancing when we hear about someone's experience, that is deeper level, and that is a true statement about what is happening, but it unlocks maybe more about why that person has had that experience and their emotion attached to the experience, and or what they think could actually be different about it. So we keep digging deeper. We sometimes get at both the solution generated by the person or getting to the right problem that they're actually ruminating in their own heart and mind. And then taking all of that across saying, okay, well, this individual is having this experience, you know, in this part of our district or at this grade level, or from the vantage point of being a caregiver versus a student or a staff member, we can see connect those dots a little bit differently as well about how to then say, this is an area we need to focus on. So this is, I mean, so yeah, so
Yeah,
it's both
which is-
and.
Which is
Yeah,
exactly
both
why
and.
I'm saying I think that you're making the exact point, I guess, for me. And if there's a way to share that with people, like, hey, I read every email that comes in. Often those emails are telling me the action to be taken, not giving me more of the context, not giving me more of the circumstance, not giving me more of the why it matters. The action to be taken, I'm sure, feels very satisfying to type out to me, but really not very helpful in how to help traverse this system to get to a good answer. And so I think exactly what you just got to is, I would happily sit with people and get to that, like, here, to help share what can be helpful in order to take action on your behalf. Here's some things I'd love for you to consider as you're sharing that with me. 3 minutes is actually really long. 2 minutes is actually really long time to talk at that podium. But usually it's, I'll be honest, people repeating the same demand 26 times versus using some time to say who they are, what they're concerned about, why it matters, how it impacts them, and here's what I would love for you to do. Like so I think there's something to bottle up so we can be in better discussion with people versus 2 full minutes of telling me the exact same demand that I don't know what underlies it. So sorry, that's my potentially controversial thing, but I think there's something in there.
Thank you.
Dr. Morales?
Yeah, as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking about, the community empathy interviews, but it's interesting because there's not a lot of meat as far as how we're engaging at different levels, depending on the relationship. So for me, I'm looking at like the student teacher or parent teacher engagement, and what does that look like? Because that's going to be very individualized for that student or family versus, might be the relationships between authentic engagement between our principals and their staff. I mean, there's so many areas and ways you can kind of break that up. And I'm wondering how broad are we thinking? Because this is very much about authentic engagement with the broader community, which I think is really important. So don't get me wrong. I do think that's important. But is that like that step one? And there's these, concentric circles that are building out, and we're starting at the big one, and are we going to work closer in, or what is like a longer term plan for that?
That's a great question. Thank you. So we didn't use concentric circles. We actually thought about the levels of engagement with our tiers. So we have kind of defined like tier 1 engagement might be something like our thought exchange. It might be as simple as the communication with the principal and their staff. And then tier 2, we've given an example of our listening sessions as an example. And these empathy interviews, I mean, this is a huge lift and a lot of resources and just time resources. And so this is really a tier 3. It's kind of where we've put empathy interviews. And so if you think about how our tiered supports in academics, attendance, behavior, now with this communication, authentic engagement, this isn't something that we would use for everything. Or we might, a teacher is very well having an individual conversation with the student, but we wouldn't really call that necessarily an empathy interview unless they're trying to seek information from a smaller subset of students. So we are working through a process, and then the hope is to help our school leaders, to help district office staff, to help you all kind of think about what information are you seeking for what purposes, and then kind of give you a tool to say, hey, this seems like it's probably a tier 1 level of engagement with what you're asking for. And if you're asking for something different, then maybe we would like to jump up to a tier 2, they're not independent either. So like we often do thought exchange and listening sessions, sometimes even empathy interviews. So we might be doing communication at all 3 levels for one issue.
And then I wanted to say, I really appreciated the idea that what happens with the information that we're getting and being able to communicate that in a strategic way back out. So that it's not like I had this, like that, like it's falling into a black hole and just where does it go after that? So I appreciated that you had that comment as I was trying to think through what do I want to ask? And then you made that comment. I was thinking the same thing as how are we circling back and making sure that people feel listened to rather than just you
And I
wrote
think-
down my stuff.
I think Leisha and Martin, like kudos to them for the work with the bonds committee, because that would be an example of a tier 3, and just posting the minutes on our website, coming back to the team at the next meeting it kind of seems simple, but it is how you go back. And, the bond committee, you approved something that isn't everything, but you heard them and you acted upon it, and you gave a really great explanations about the things that you didn't do and the why. And so the more you can help us model those things, the better we get as a system, and the more our entire community, because it's our community, is more willing to engage with us if they believe that we're actually going to do something with it and then get back to them.
Amen. Dr. Taylor.
Just a minor point of clarification on the listed in the plan here, create a system of tracking and managing district partnerships. What exactly are you tracking? That wasn't clear to me.
So first of all, Marcel did a big lift, which I may have assumed incorrectly, that we had a list of all of the people that are serving us as a school district as partnerships. We didn't. And so now we do. And we've learned that when we kind of polled school leaders, district office staff, et cetera, we have, I think last I looked today was 98 different partners. But partnerships are different. Like our partnership with ISF is very different than our partnership with somebody. Dorian. There you go. Dorian. And so using models from, I believe, King County, Marcel, I think it's in the document, looking at the four, like kind of categorizing partnerships and how we staff are expected to behave when a partnership is in the interdependent level versus the integrated level. So for example, I'm the relationship owner for communities and schools, which is at Issaquah High School and Issaquah Middle School. And so the next step in this process is and we already did this, but to sit down with them and set goals that we can work on as a district, or in those two schools, for example, and then report back out to the superintendent, because we're putting dollars into communities and schools. And there hasn't, in the history of the ISD, to my knowledge, been a system where we're saying, well, are we meeting our goals that we intended to with this partnership? Now, some partnerships like Dorian, it's a different relationship, right? And so we're trying to kind of categorize so that the staff, the owners of those relationships, knows what's expected of the partner and then of me as the relationship owner.
Oh, it's great.
Anything else on authentic engagement before we move to the final one of organizational effectiveness? Alrighty. So Stephen, if you would mind toggling up to key highlights on page 15. While people are gathering their thoughts, Stephen, can you actually go to page 16 where it says develop a transparent equity-based budget? So I think for me, as you guys continue to do this work, and I know we're gonna have a broader conversation in August, it would be really helpful for me to see if you come up with a framework of, gosh, for these needs, we are going to support it in this way. And then I would love to see you apply that framework retroactively to show what it looks like on our current, like, how does our current budget match up with what it would look like differently for the budget that we just completed? Because I think that would get a sense that the board has pushed against the business office for many, many years, asking for disproportionate funding to support student need. And so whatever you guys come up with, I would love to sort of see what it would actually look like before we then move forward. Because I think we all have a sense on where we think the needs are and what that disproportionate funding should or would look like. And so it'd be helpful for us to ground us in that conversation when it comes up in August.
Okay, yes, we can do that.
So wanted to open up to the rest of the board for comments on organizational effectiveness. You left this
Well-
board speechless. That's impressive.
Yeah, I would guess for me, it's the fact that we're really looking at the equity-based budgeting and what that looks like. So to me, that's been a predominantly important aspect that I've wanted for 12 years now. So thank you. And then just looking at the bond committee work and could you tell me just a little bit more what you mean by lean training? Because that might be verbiage that I don't. Are you referring to something specific or?
Oh, so the lean continuous improvement training that we received from the auditor's office. It gets into some of the specific lean principles, they call it. So it's something that I wouldn't be able to rattle off as a textbook example for you right now, but some of it has to do, generally speaking, with how do you map a certain process? How do you find waste in a process? How do you look at something and say, okay, we can remove this to make the process better. Then you loop back around and you say, okay, did this work? Nope. We need to continue to look at this in other ways. And so there are several tools that they give you and ways to do this that expand on that quite a bit. That's kind of the general idea. And so you can apply that. You can look at any process in the system and kind of utilize that thinking to try and improve it.
Otherwise known as Six Sigma, if you're familiar with Six
Thank
Sigma.
you.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Well, I'm just,
Yes,
I knew that would be a term
right.
more readily available. There's lots of flavors. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Wes. Any other comments on organizational effectiveness? They were wise to have two of them. That makes it much easier to track and monitor. Okay. Well, I'll pause at this moment before we take final board reflections to open it up for public comment. So is there any public comment in the room or on Zoom? Well, I wanted to go through those last three so your team had the opportunity to hear reflections. I know they heard them on the first two, so didn't want to miss out because your whole team has put in a ton of work. So I wanted them to get that. So I want to open up to any final board reflections, if there are any, before we have a motion ahead of us. Director Mullins.
So I'll just go back to maybe where Director Moraldo started, which is it's just really impressive to be able to monitor this report in this way, the breadth of it, leveraging the strategic plan. I think it's particularly well put together. I appreciate the summary section at the end of data to watch and the source of it. And so that's really my final comment for something that hasn't been done in so long. This is sure a really nice first pass.
Director Taylor?
Yeah, I would just say as well, I do very much applaud this work. I'm a linear thinker. I've said that, I think, to everybody on the board. So, this way of thinking about how to address the opportunities facing the district just makes a lot of sense to me. I do really believe that data and reporting are the way to tackle issues. So I just think it's great. And as I said just earlier, I think it's really great for our community too, the transparency that it provides so that, the folks that we're serving understand the direction we're going into. So.
Thank you. Director Moraldo.
So I haven't written anything on the fancy piece of paper, so I don't have anything as of yet, but I did want to ask the board in reflecting on the actual data piece at the end. I appreciate that we have BIPOC and that it's closer together because otherwise it's just a lot of data, and I don't know that we would refine our practices depending on which of those subgroups, so I'm fine with that. I'm wondering though, if we could add a second group of students receiving special services, right? So, and whether that's multilingual or special ed or 504s, but that we're tracking that as well would be the other population that I would want to be looking to. So I see head nods. I will add that to my little sheet of paper now.
Yeah, special
So
service.
it's not going to stop
Great.
for this one, but we'll hope to see that in the future.
Thank you.
Any other final reflections? Alrighty. Well, I will echo what everyone has said as well for this first monitoring report. I really appreciate all of the work that was done to lead up to this moment. And I think it's a unique time for us to be able to reflect on all the work that you do to get us to where we are today. So with that, we have a motion. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? There you go. First monitoring ends one ever.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel Hauser.
Next item on our agenda is monitoring report ends for life management and personal awareness.
I move we approve E4, life management and personal awareness as presented.
Second.
Superintendent, thank you for bringing this back to us. There were many board questions and comments, and I know you guys have done a lot of work to address those questions. So I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, so thank you. After the May meeting where we reviewed the monitoring report for ends for life management and personal awareness, we made some adjustments, added in and responded to areas of question or query where we could. And overall just took a turn to also talk about some of the questions that did come up and made some, adjustments based on our own judgment there as well. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Bailey just to do a brief kind of recap of where we are now compared to last time and go from there.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much. For the continuation of ENS4, we've included data from the Healthy Youth Survey to triangulate with the data from student surveys and the achievement grades of health and PE. This shows that while students participate in the school program, if the Healthy Youth statisticians are placing the bar for healthy living at 60 minutes every day of physical activity, 7 days a week, our youth are not yet meeting that mark, and likely neither are all of us. The Swedish school-based mental health report shows the number of students, or the largest number of students of both visits and individual students accessing that support are at Issaquah High School and Issaquah Middle School for the middle level. And in the middle level, the range is between 37 students and 93 students, and that 93 students is at Issaquah Middle. Care coordination shows up as the most frequent reason why students visit the Swedish school-based mental health worker. And I think that helps you triangulate what you have heard today, what you heard from Ms. Carver about Care Solace, and that providing the coordination of care is a need in our community. This report added data about how students follow their passions and their intended career paths, with more data about which students elected an advanced version of the required class and which classes students take beyond the required Algebra 2, and the number of semesters in interest area classes such as technology, CT, and fine and performing arts. We received feedback during the May 23rd board meeting that the legacy student surveys and the questions are perhaps waning in relevance at this time. The executive leadership, myself, and the building principals have been worried about over-surveying students, both in the number of times we survey them and the length of the surveys. So we welcome an opportunity to work together to gain a crisp understanding of what information is desired for the monitoring reports, and also that which guides the practices at the building level, always in support of students.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate the work that you guys have done. I would ask that we go to the bottom of page 8. And I know getting data or answering the questions that the board has is a challenge that I don't wish to be in that role. But for me, knowing this question about 11th grade, choosing an advanced English language arts class, for me, I need the context to know what these same students did in 10th grade.
Oh, okay.
Because I really want to know, do we see a precipitous drop off of, or however you want to describe it, from students who, let's say, take advanced language arts in 10th grade at Issaquah High School and then elect to not do AP language in 11th grade? Or likewise at Skyline, to take honors block in 10th grade and then in 11th grade to not take advanced language arts or advanced
Sure.
like
So
honors block, whatever IB block, I guess it would be. And then if you would clarify when you say what advanced is, because I don't know course numbers, those don't mean anything to me. So are those, when you say advanced, is that AP language arts and IB English? Because I would want that clarity spelled out in this current report, even for today, for what you say, for what EN 600A and 652A really are, because I have no idea what those are.
sure, that's super easy. And I appreciate reminding that we use a lot of acronyms in education and not everybody can pick those up right away. So in the work that we did in social studies, we did backtrack on how many students went beyond the required. And we noticed then that very, very, very few students start taking an advanced class in 11th grade. They start them in 9th and 10th grade, but we haven't gone backwards. So I think that's a very curious question.
Because for me, that gets to sort of what this is, not just about choice, but persistence. And I want to know if we see a lag in persistence from 10th to 11th grade, I think we should just explore why that is. Because then when you look at the number of students, for example, at Issaquah High School that are doing advanced language arts at 127, and again, I don't know what advanced means still. I don't know if Issaquah High School offers an honors English as well as AP English. I have no clue what Issaquah offers. But when I go down to that page 9 and look at the distribution of math, and it's hard for me again to interpret because I don't know what grades these are, and I wouldn't ask you to tell me them by grade level. But certainly just given the distribution, it seems like a lot more of our students are in pre-calculus or calculus or AP calculus in 11th grade. So I would say a far higher number of students are taking an advanced math class than an advanced humanities class. And my question to the district is going to be, one, you have to like give me enough data to say, is that true or not? Because I can't tell currently. But I think it's a question to want to know the answer to. And I totally support student choice, but sometimes student choice is driven by things that are not really student choice. And that's what I'm really trying to get at. And then for the personal finance, the question that was asked is how many students didn't get to take it? So when I see 206 students at Issaquah High School took personal finance, that's a huge number. So I really want to know, did 400 want to take it? And as we get ready to have this conversation in August about personal finance requirement for graduation, when I see such widely variable numbers at the 3 schools, that again gets to our equity issue. Is it 29 at Skyline because that's only one section that's allowed because you have a teacher that can only fit one section into their schedule, and really 75 wanted to take it? So that's what would be really helpful to know.
Yeah, it was helpful to get that question. And although the mental gymnastics of this report being now so long ago, we did look in this year's class. And in this year's class, there were sufficient seats for anybody who wanted to take personal finance to take it. There were a lot of kids students who registered for it and then dropped it by the time it came time. And the registrar shared it was running start, or they had other choices and their other elective came up. But we did ask that question of this year's group, and in this year's class, all the students who wanted to take it found a seat in that class. And if they didn't, that's because they chose something else at the last minute. But I don't I cannot take that to the bank for 2 years ago.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Can you just tell me why you think that there's such wide variance between so many more students at Issaquah High School taking personal finance versus at our other two schools?
Well, Issaquah High School is a much bigger school than Liberty. And so that would be, we could math it out and say, what would be the natural distribution if you control for size of school. I am always curious about which class they take. And this year, Mr. Malish and I have really been working on college and the high school because it's of interest to us to bring equity opportunities for college and the high school in the high school. So they don't have to go to Running Start and they still can earn college credits without having to commit to an AP or an IB class. So we're excited about that. I don't have a statistical answer about why there would be so many at Issaquah High versus the other schools. And I'd have to take a look and almost pie chart it out to see where they are if they aren't in personal finance, and probably control for grade, what grade they're in.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry. Director
Well,
Wayne was first. Sorry.
Just to take along to what Director Gallagher was saying, I'm curious too, and I don't know if there's a way to measure this. And you were kind of referencing this earlier for Skyline. This idea of is there just not enough space in their schedule to be able to take the course? Like if they're taking Running Start, I don't know how we could measure that from a data standpoint, but looking at that number and how drastically different it is from IHS and from Skyline, I'm curious to see if those students at Skyline maybe just don't feel like they have enough space in the schedule to be able to take the personal finance class. I don't know if there's data that would tell us that, but that's a guess I have. But I would be curious if there's a way to measure that somehow. I don't know. Or find that out if there's truth in that.
Director Martha?
For me, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. So I just want to clarify my thought about what this is. This is for that school year. We took a look at the distribution of what math classes students were taking that was outside or above Algebra 2. So it could be freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. We don't know what level of class they are. Correct. So I almost feel like it's difficult to read this without knowing how many kids are in each of those other classes to know what am I really looking at. So I guess it's going to be 483 students out of a total of, of roughly 1,300 students at Liberty are in. But I guess it's hard for me to gauge what level, because I think my question really is, when somebody graduates, how many of my graduates took beyond Algebra 2? And I'm not sure I'm interested in the distribution of which classes it was. So I guess I'm just trying to say, what is the data supposed to tell me? Like, what are you hoping I glean from it? What do we as a board hope that we glean from it versus what that's?
Yep, I think that's a great question. So then in the original report, it was very focused on what were seniors taking if they were past Algebra 2. And so because students enter the math path, and you're right, we have some 8th graders taking Algebra 2, trying to find a way to provide you the answer to this question. Past the bare minimum, what are our students doing and how far are they going in math?
So for me, what it was about is seeing what's the distribution amongst our 3 high schools, because I think there's such wide variability in opportunity. And so that's my biggest concern. And this highlights that I think the variability in opportunity is concerning to me. And I would need to be shown data to prove otherwise to me. So I mean, why I see calculus, which is CHS is college and the high school, I'm presuming. And like, why is that only offered at Liberty High School? You don't have to answer the question. And when I look at IB, HL, and SL math and the distribution and see sort of, I love the 2 years back to back, so I can see, gosh, 70 students took it in 21-22 for the SL Math 1, and then only 62 decided to continue on. in SL Math 2 versus an HL Math 1, 107 took it and 104 persisted in HL 2. And so just curious why. And I'm sure there's, people move districts and whatnot, but because these sequences at Skyline are, so many of them are meant to be 2-year courses, I think it's really highly problematic in how it impacts student scheduling and locks them in my words, unnecessarily into pathways. When I look at other high schools, gosh, they could be getting college credit through calculus college in the high school. They don't have a chance to do.
We are very excited about what we're doing right now and what we're planning to do next year to bring all of those options for college and high school to the table with the alignment out of strategy to get the common course code. So that's work we're really, really proud of, and we're very excited to have unlocked that key.
So for me, that's where I sit back and go, neat. And I realize it would be a larger a spreadsheet, but knowing the grade level could tell you how many of those kids were taking SL Math 1. Were they, for some reason, taking it as seniors so they didn't pass on to SL Math 2 because they graduated? Or so not having the distribution of like, what grade am I looking at to kind of know? Because I'm always interested, like why students are taking calculus instead of AP Calc. So,
Sure.
Right. So I think but it's harder for me to identify what I can actually glean from this without it either being a more robust, having, all the grades disaggregated, or to only provide it to tell me when seniors graduate, what was the highest level of math they were taking.
Yes, and I agree with all of that. So
And I think listening to your questions and the key things you're curious about, that won't be one graph. That will have to be very focused data pulls to specifically answer the question of how many students wanted personal finances versus how many students took it and what grade they took each of those advanced classes. So if we attempted to swing too far back to the simplest data and there's more that you're interested in, that's super possible.
yeah, and that's not for tonight or for this report. This is just for further dialogue and conversation, just to be clear.
For me to write
Yeah.
down on a nice piece of paper.
Oh, yes. Well, for Meraldo to write down on the piece of paper, Dr. Mullins.
If I can ask a question,
Of course.
if Dr. Go first. It's a global question at the end, or it's related to the section if this is still in the section.
I think my question is I'm curious about you having the current year data, particularly about personal finance. And you said people got it unless they changed out of it, but did the amount change dramatically? Do we still see the same over selection or higher selection in IHS than the other two? Because even Issaquah is not double the size of Liberty, and this is more than 3 times. So do we still see the same difference in distribution of who selects it?
It's very close. It's a popular class at Issaquah High School.
Right.
And I think that there was one section this year and one section last year. There's a popular class at Issaquah High. I visited that particular class myself.
Yeah. This report, which by the way, thank you. I think what's great about this report from last time is there's enough here to have more questions. I felt like last time I was like, I don't think I'm getting to what I want to know. So now there's much more, I think, rich conversation we had for the next time. So I appreciate that for sure. And I think the personal finance, I was a little indifferent to that one. I'd say a couple weeks, but last time we talked about it. But now actually having lived through, having a student took the course, I probably feel a lot more strongly about that and that becoming a requirement now, after seeing the material and seeing what gets covered. And I guess it is really interesting, just the selection behavior difference between the two schools. And I've said many times math isn't my thing, but this is a lot of selection of incredibly high level math without a lot of attention paid to what is actually going to be practically useful for kids, particularly at Skyline, and Liberty's is a low percentage as well. So I am now much more interested in maybe having that discussion about what goes on with the requiring of personal finance. And I probably was 6 months ago, having not seen the actual material. And then what really drives that behavior for me, like back to the stress level, the stress load. And what this wouldn't cover, correct, is the kids, because I do know a couple who finished all the math at high school and are taking even higher level math at community college. Right. So that isn't even represented here.
It would, it would have a nod to it in Director Moraldo's suggestion of having it by grade. So if you
Okay.
saw a 11th grader in Calculus BC, there is no more math except for an elective, you could track it a little bit differently that way if it came out by grade.
Okay. Very, really helpful.
So
Dr.
my
Moore?
question,
Oh, no.
Sorry,
Heather.
Superintendent.
Yeah.
yeah, so my question is, so when I look at this section, right, so I can, this is, the more data also provides more opportunity for question in my mind as well. So I appreciate hearing your comment about the additional information provided tonight. When I see this section, it's about identifying, understanding, and developing personal strengths and interests, which is, I hear a mix of both looking for that. So when I hear Director Moraldo's question, are we consistently providing that? So I see that we need to do more, right, potentially with some of these courses in providing access across all the schools. But it also makes me wonder if we are doing more requirements, how do we then balance, you know what I mean, the choice as well? So it's surfacing new questions for me as well, because this is about identify the frequent and consistent opportunities. That's in my interpretation. That is not necessarily stated in the actual section. I would modify that, as we progress through time. But it's really being able to help students identify what their strengths and interests are and how are we providing that choice and access across all schools. So back to the structural question as well. So I'm just sort of pulling together some of those thoughts that I will want more, conversation on as we progress.
Yeah, Dr. Mullins and then Dr. Mullins.
It's so, again, I'm having a very specific experience with this in the last 6 months. And I think it is a balance, of course, of choice. It's a balance of what people are trying to get to next. But I think for me, when I look down this list, there's really only one of these classes that speaks to what we have in that mission statement on the wall, right? Prepared and eager to accept the academic, occupational, personal, and practical challenges of life in a dynamic and global environment. And to not highlight that understanding, what we went through, what is a mortgage and how do they work? How do you plan for a trip? What are credit cards, right? That is more squarely tied to that mission. Yes, I love all the calculating people know how to do, and I know we need it in the world to do lots of things, but I think, there's a piece about that core component of what's on that wall that only one of these does. And so, yes, I want the choice. And I think we also have to make sure we're satisfying that one on the board.
I'm glad I won you over to that conversation.
You didn't, but sitting through some of these exercises did.
Fine.
Sorry. I had to say it.
And I'm going to tack on to what you said. I'm glad it was a good segue. So I want to go to slide 18. I want to go back into 4.9 and personal finance. And I have to put my finance hat on here and just talk about this because it's interesting. Coming into the board seat, I didn't think about this necessarily the opportunity as much as I'm seeing now over the course of the last several months that I've been on the board. And when I look in terms of just the data that's collected seems like it's pretty limited. I mean, we're looking at, a relatively small population that we're pulling on, particularly on the postgraduate survey. When I look at, 200 or so, postgraduates, when I know, a week ago, we, graduated around 1,500 students. So it feels low to me. But then I also look at just what options we're offering. So 8th grade social studies, financial literacy unit that's in there. And I've had an 8th grader this last year and had an opportunity to kind of connect with several 8th graders and said, hey, did you tell me about that? And many could not articulate what they really learned from that. Maybe it was there, but I don't know if it went deep enough. And I know I've said this before, I think there's opportunities to build up to something. So I think at the elementary level, there's opportunities. I know I mentioned this before. My son went through BizTown in fifth grade, which is a build up leveraging an outside partner, which is a great opportunity, doing more in the middle school level than to build into something in high school. So, you know, when I look at the space and limited space that our high schoolers have, I'm wondering if we can build into it so we're not taking as much of that space. I do, and I know we're going to talk about this more in August about a requirement, but I want to be conscious of the fact there's not a ton of space at the high school level. So how can we build into it? And, you know, potentially again, starting elementary, upper elementary, and then moving middle school and then going into high school. So you're building into it because it's, as Director Malling said, I mean, this is important. It goes to our mission. And so many of our students that are coming out that don't necessarily have that skill set and didn't have the time in high school to take the personal finance class. And I think as a district, again, we can think about how we build up to it. So we're not suddenly at the high school level, that's the one point in time that they have it, if they have space in their schedule to be able to take it. So I look forward to the conversations we're going to have in August around that, because I'm starting to see the importance of that more and more at my time on the board and the opportunity.
And just one very quick point on that. And the data here does show that 1/3 of the students do not feel prepared upon graduation to deal with their finances. That's too many.
Of course.
Kind of going again back to the topic around personal finance, I think there's also this misnomer again when you're looking at it, and we're a pretty academic heavy community. It isn't necessarily those academic, there's priority put to other courses obviously too. So when you're having to pick, those are not always the ones that are picked first. So I think we just emphasizing it, bringing more importance to it, talking to our community about it so that families understand too the importance of having their kids take it before they graduate. Because once they graduate, they realize, gosh, there was a missed opportunity. So I think there's just broader communication opportunity too. So, thanks.
I agree. Dr. Mullins?
Yes, so the survey item you bring up about the preparedness jumped out. It's part of it as well. I think the stark differences between the school, obviously I'm steeped in the Issaquah High School community, so I know a ton of kids take it. I think looking at the stark difference really is what got me over the line, but it also, I think, is important. What was also interesting was sort of the office productivity basics that came with it, right? Some of it is learning about the personal finance, but I felt actually sitting there working on, well, how do you use Excel to do this exercise was one of the better practical things I've seen in a long time. Like I'm not going to forget the lesson itself, but I guess I'm stuck on the employability pieces we keep talking about, how people are ready to be career ready, and having something that practically is building that hands-on confidence in tools required in being employable, for me is another part that sticks out. I was like, oh, well, welcome to my world. Here's how this actually works. And so for me, I just want to go back. I love your concept about earlier. Again, I'm always pushing middle school and earlier, but also I'm really, really going to stay on this topic of employability in high school, post high school, even again as a way to pay for or assist families in paying for the actual college experience if that's the choice. So I just call that out because that's where I'm spending a lot of my mental energy in the moment, just watching people who've gotten to this great milestone we just celebrated. And what brought me to this work was where my family could afford to do great things and watching families who couldn't. And so watching the number of families making really hard choices and choices they never thought they'd have to make, kids in our district who are excelling, like very high GPAs, very high extracurriculars, and still not able to take advantage of the choice that kid is now eligible for because of the basic issues of how to pay for it. And so I think we have to be conscious. Yes, it's about kids who won't go to college, but it's also about kids who aren't going to go to college because they can't afford it or they can't afford to get to the one that they really wanted. And so that is the spectrum that is deeply highlighted for me at the moment.
Well, you're making up for last meeting. Oh, that's what I'm saying. You're making up for it. Troy.
Did you have one for you? Oh, I'm gonna again tack onto that because it got me thinking. Some of the things that we learn that are so basic, sorry. I think about when I was in 7th grade, I had to take a mandatory. It was home economics and personal finance, and to this day, there are skills that I use weekly that go back to that course I took in 7th grade. How to balance a checkbook. I don't know how to turn on the oven. I mean, some very basic things that I remember. I think, gosh, I'm really glad that that teacher taught me that in 7th grade. So it's this interesting piece that we need to make sure that we're including for our Issaquah School District students.
Wasn't there a state legislator that was trying to get that to become a requirement? That's Oh, not home ec, but like personal finance, what we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Judge Taylor.
I want to change topic within the report. Can we go to page 3? I just have a clarifying question about some of the Healthy Youth Survey data. Where we list here, looks like, great numbers that feelings of anxiety appear to be going down amongst, various grade levels. But I noticed that the comparison is to 2021, where I would imagine student anxiety was perhaps at an all-time high because of COVID. I'm just curious how those numbers match up pre-COVID. Do we have those numbers? Probably not, or do we? We do? Yeah.
We do. And remember that the group of students changed in COVID. So it used to be on the even years and now it's on the odd years. So be
I see.
careful
7,
about
9, 11.
comparing
Yeah.
the cohort of students. So if you were a student 10 years ago, you would have taken the Healthy Youth in the 6th, in the 8th, in the 10th, and the 12th, and the kids were the same. That group flipped from the evens to the odds in COVID. So I just went back 1 year for a comparability of cohort. But you can go back and look at the scores globally before they're posted on our website.
Great. Thank you.
If we go back to bottom of page 8, because I know we went on this long bird walk about personal finance, and I do appreciate it. But just finish this off for me on page 8 about student choice, because that's really what this section is about. Is that when I look and see that about 500 kids at any given time are taking pre-calculus or an equivalent course at Skyline, and 114 of them are taking advanced, whatever that is, whatever it is that you'll clarify for me.
I can't quite hear you. I'm so sorry.
That when I look at it, roughly 500 kids at any given time are taking pre-calculus or higher at Skyline, and yet only 114 of them are taking an advanced English class. That's what compels me to say that we have a need at Skyline High School for an AP language and literature course offering at that school. Because I think there will be many students that will be interested in taking a single year course rather than a 2-year course of advanced English that they get locked into or have to choose as a spring of their sophomore year, that's the path that they are willing to do. And I think that that's a huge part of it. So I think when I think about student choice, I think we have to really look at through the lens of, since we have a building where many of our courses are 2-year courses, it's a different kind of a choice. So that's why knowing that data for how many students in 10th grade are on the standard versus advanced track is really critical for me to know that.
I'm glad you took that last step because I did have the 10th to 11th, but I think these two charts do not isolate a certain grade level. And so 11th to 11th or 11th graders as a whole set would be helpful. And then it's going to get bigger, people. It's going to get it'll be a longer report with all these. It will be. And it should give you the information you need to ask your questions.
Well, hopefully it gives you the information you need to make sure that students have the choices across the district and equity of choice. So. Okay.
Promise it's not about personal finance. So one of the areas I know for me in the last review we did of this, it was the section on resilience, which now I've scrolled past the section header to tell you what section that is. Shoot. I think I'm on page 13 to get to the resilience piece. It starts at the end of 13. I just want to acknowledge, I think this is a lot more helpful information that's here. It certainly raises questions for me, particularly when you start to look at some of the items you've included this time around like math SBA growth, which is on 14, and that percentage of students who scored below standard then accelerated their learning, that dropping year to year as an example. Some of the credit recovery ones. So it's I'm just saying, one, I want to acknowledge that this is, I think, a more helpful set of information. I think it does require a little bit more investigation on some of the whys the data is moving in the way it is in some of these answers, and then what's the action that needs to be taken in order to go a different direction. So like, for example, number of students enrolled in online credit recovery looks like it's getting lower and lower each time, and that may be just an offerings item versus grade improvement. So I guess I just have some questions about some of do we have theories of why some of these choices are being made, like, again, the math dropping, and then some of the recovery options?
Sure, I have one theory, and that is students who are in credit recovery are more likely to benefit from a teacher, a person in front of them, teaching them, looking at their work, responding to them, versus the online for grade improvement for a student who has already achieved some passing grade but wants a better, stronger passing grade. And we hold a strong belief that students who struggle with learning benefit from a caring, attentive teacher. And so we might move them to one of the different options for credit retrieval, such as in-person summer school or in-person credit retrieval within the school day.
Super helpful.
Before we take final reflections on ends 4, wanted to open up for any public comment in the room or on Zoom. See none. Any final reflections, questions, thoughts on ends 4?
I'll just say thank you for the responsiveness and the rework and looking at some of these. Super helpful. Obviously gives us more questions, but I feel like it's now meaty enough that we can get to some of those more questions. So really appreciate the rework.
Interesting. I was going to say something similar, only more specific around 4.7 about working with a diverse group of people. I really appreciate the data that came up and that we had the data around. I like to work with a partner in a group class and having that focus on working together. So I think for me, that really was what I was looking for in that piece. So I appreciate that.
I would just add on to that too. I thank you for the great work on this, and I appreciate the dialogue and conversation, and look forward to future conversations beyond just the personal finance piece. That I do look forward to particularly, but everything else that's in this as well. Lots of good stuff. So thank you.
Well, I've already said my piece about why I think personal finance is important. So that's why I'm glad you guys are there now. But it fits perfectly under life management and personal awareness. It's like that. So
I mean, if it shows up as a graduation requirement in our district, I don't know that I'd vote no.
Yeah. Okay. Did you have any other reflection on this? Since this was a rework and probably the first one you've done, so I didn't know if there was any other.
I appreciate the dialogue tonight, but I especially appreciate Dr. Bailey's leadership in helping to engage in dialogue after the May board meeting. Rich Melish in support of that, and the executive directors of schools, and it's been helpful to kind of refine what the data set is and how it actually is supporting the section that we're in, but also generate the questions that are important around for personal finance. There are life skills. And I will remind us that during the strategic planning process, we heard a lot of the community say, we want our students to graduate and know how to be adults. I mean, that's sort of a basic level of language, but with that came certainly understanding how to do finance on a personal level, not just finance in general, but yes.
Perfect. If there's no further comments, there is a motion for E4. All those in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Like-
There you go. Again, thank you, Superintendent and your team for bringing this back to us. We appreciate it. Now we are to governance policy language review second read. And I think we have guests here to help us. And I want to do this sequentially this time. And I know that there are Director Mullins has specific comments that she wants to make, but before we get to those, and unless you can tie them to these as we go through them, I would ask you, is that we're going to go through the versions that are second read and the yellow parts by BSR, GC, and OE. And then we can come back and go beyond that. We're going to try and do sequentially this time versus last time was kind of like all over the place. So with that being said, we are going to open it up to our guests first, and then for any sort of framing or introduction, and then we will move in through the three that I just mentioned.
Okay, so just the 30-second update for people who maybe weren't tuned in 2 weeks ago. We gave you a binder full of recommended policy changes to convert your existing policy governance policies to coherent governance. We tried very hard not to make any substantive changes, except for the yellow highlighted bits, which were things that we saw in our looking at other coherent governance districts that we thought, wow, that language is really good or better than what Issaquah has, or for whatever reason, we felt compelled to recommend it. We had the discussion at the first read. The board came up with a handful of questions, concerns, comments, which we implemented those changes. You have them. I believe their editing is in a different color. Most of those were what I would call tweaks, with the exception of GC 12, the student representative policy, where I tried to go back and make it more clearly reflect your actual process, because when that policy was first written, you didn't have 2-year staggered terms, and now you do. So there were a few things that needed to be tweaked. So that is a little bit of substantive change. And otherwise, I open it to you for second read. Questions, changes, comments, whatever.
Perfect. So to orient yourself, we're going to start through this way where it says to the board, the following edits have been added since the June 13th meeting. And that's where I'm going to start, just so you have that same grounding. And so we're going to start with BSR 3. And I want to, again, draw your attention. The yellow was language that we accepted in our first read, and the rewording recommended that we asked based on the conversation we had in our first read is in purple. So you'll see, provided that such action shall not be in conflict with the general board values and objectives of the district, is the sentence. So is there any concern about that now as written?
So there's 2 purple on this one, right? That is the directly is the addition, and
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yes, there's
I
number
carved
2
me.
also.
Yes, number 2. Thank you. Directly. Thank you. In number 2, the board will not directly evaluate any staff member other than the superintendent formally or informally. Perfect. Any concerns about that one? Okay. I'm gonna try and mark this as I go. That way we will keep this in order. Now we'll scroll down to BSR 3.5. Or not 3.5.
Yeah, you had
Yeah,
there
3.5.
3.2 and 3.5 is both BSR 3.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's the new numbering system. It's
It-
great once you get used to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're to GC 3. And so GC 3 we accepted again the language in yellow at the first read, and this is to highlight the elimination of the word in 3.3D, which was just a duplicative word.
It was just, yeah, the role relationship didn't make sense, although I did go back and that is the language other districts use, but I don't actually know what they mean by it. So
Okay.
I'm perfectly fine with your eliminating that word.
Any concerns about that change in our second read? No. Okay. The next one is GC7. Like this is almost bingo.
Right.
Again, it's the typo that was in blue at the very top. So we're GC7. Keep going to 7 here at 3. And it was to strike the word to. Yes. Oh, just at the top. Thank you. So it says board committees, when used, will support the work of the board as defined in policy GC3, board job description, and will never interfere with the operational work of the superintendent. Any questions about that as a second read? Okay. The next one is GC12. GC12 student representatives, and it was rewording of 12.1, 12.2, and 12.9 to reflect actual practice. So I'll read 12.1. So it says the board has created non-voting advisory positions to act as student representatives to the board. There will be 8 total positions with a goal of being 2 positions each, parenthesis, a first year and a second year, parenthesis, for Gibson Eck, Issaquah, Liberty, and Skyline high schools. If there are not sufficient qualified applicants from each school, the board and interview team can recommend students from any high school to get to a total of 8 student representatives. This was changed to reflect any current or future practice. Okay. Number 2 is 4 student representatives will be selected each spring prior to the term they will serve as representatives. The term of office will be 2 years, beginning in July of the application year and concluding at the end of June. The overlap of terms will allow for mentorship by the second year representatives. Yes.
I think my only question around this is it, I'm thinking of the case of which a second year student doesn't come back for one reason or another. Maybe their family moved, or for whatever reason they don't take the second year commitment. Is that represented here? Should it be represented somewhere else? I'm just wondering if there should be language around that.
There is language on number 12 that says, in the event that a student representative is unable to complete their term of office, the board may appoint another student representative at its discretion. So I would say that covers that possibility. There's
And
intent and there's what actually happens.
And then what I like about the way 2 is worded is it doesn't have to be the mentoring doesn't have to come from the second year from their specific school, right? So if it's like their own doesn't come back, as long as there's other second years, I think that wording covers that.
Thank you. And then 12.9, which is the panel will recommend 4 first-year candidates to the board for its approval at its next regularly scheduled meeting. The board will vote on the approval of the returning second-year representatives at the same meeting.
That was the practice that you did just very recently because you voted in the new ones, but you also voted to
reaffirm.
sort of renew the existing ones.
Yes. Thank you. It's always good when our policy matches our practice. So we appreciate that. Questions on this one?
My only thing, I think it does fit, but the panel recommends to the select committee, and the select committee basically makes the choice that's recommended. So I wouldn't say that the panel is recommending, because there are times where the panel has said one thing and we're like, no.
I've never been part of that. So what should the appropriate wording be?
Oh, so would
And
you
so the-
then change the panel to the school board liaisons or the, whatever we
Right,
call
so
you guys?
I don't know what her
liaisons.
name is.
I think it was school.
It's
Further.
defined somewhere.
It's,
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, that we're making.
And you can say maybe based on the feedback from the panel,
I think
Okay.
that's fair.
the student rep
Following the
committee.
input of the panel,
Yeah.
input from the panel.
Okay, hang on just a second and I will read that back to you. And what do we call them? What do we call the board people?
It may be defined in
We
the
do.
other, the jobs section, the board, responsibilities policy,
Yeah.
I think is where we name us. students.
Oh,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
right.
It's
It's in
not
a
in this
different,
one.
it's in a
It's in the-
different GC.
Yeah.
Look at me, no way.
Look at knowing that terms.
Well, okay, so what I'm hearing is, based on feedback from the panel, the student representative liaisons, and I will get the exact wording of what we call that, will recommend for first year candidates, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so does that wording
please.
work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Then I have one in that one. So in 13, where we have the reference materials, we said the question marks. On WASDA model policy.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was because we weren't sure that we could link to the model policy because we thought it was password protected, but you figured that
Right.
out.
Well, a lot of the model policies are password protected, which you wouldn't want to link to.
Mhm.
But that one they do put on the outside on their website. It's in a, like in a box folder. So we could, this was a suggestion that someone had made to add that. Although no other policies have any other reference documents linked to them, but this one does. And if you want that one added, we can either link to their website, you guys can, or put it on your website, a copy of it, and keep it there linked.
Just be aware that when you have, what do you call them, hyperlinks
Yeah.
like this in a policy, it needs to be somebody's responsibility to make sure those are always working.
So great point. And so maybe we think about how we add that as information to our actual website versus in the policy. And then my comment was, and maybe we can handle the same way, is I would like to make sure the student reps have the connection to the WASDA Student Representatives Network as well.
But see, are these things you really want in the policy?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah,
happy
but
it
these-
being handled in the same exact way we talked about, so we can take that as a non-policy item and just what we communicate on the website. But I think the first year, I think we were well in before we even talked about the student rep network. We did better this year, but I just want to make sure it's one of the reference points, because we give in the interview process, we actually give them this policy. So we could maybe put a note to reference. Do we have a specific website for the student reps, Leisha? That they
I don't think
reference?
so.
Okay,
It's not a bad idea.
So-
It isn't, because you could put all the resources for the student
There.
reps in one place.
So
Because
that's
like
maybe
this
what we'll do with it.
monitoring calendar and, other things, the school board handbook, those get updated every so often. And so
Okay.
all
So
the
maybe
links
that's
need
a
to be kept
better
current.
handle for the student rep references to actually create a page. And that's what we share during the recruiting process versus trying to hold these in the policy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that having a separate section in the school board under our header for student representative would be helpful. So it is on GC.
So we would
5?
eliminate, oh, I'm sorry, hang on this one, we would eliminate 13.
You would eliminate 13. Yes,
Yeah.
that will go into a separate section of the
Webpage for
website.
students. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
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 So it is called student. or sorry, liaisons to the student representatives is the
I knew
wording.
I knew it had liaison in
But
it.
just so you can see, go to the next, so it's 2H, Stephen.
H. Liaisons to student reps. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, consider those changes made.
The next one is OE 1. And it was striking the word imprudent. So it would now read, the superintendent shall not cause, allow, or fail to take reasonable measures to prevent any practice, activity, decision, or organizational condition which is unlawful, unethical, unsafe, inequitable, disrespectful, in violation of board policy, or endangers the district's public image or credibility. Director Mullins.
So first of all, I listened to the whole conversation as I went through and made my choices. And while there is something in the spirit of the imprudent that I do want to bring back in August, I'm okay with the striking it now. And for me, it's getting to like the planfulness to change management of things and making sure we're managing that in a way that there's predictability around, but I'm okay with that in August. I think for me, what I was struck with OE1 and OE5 is that we were still maintaining the shall not language. And so I did wonder if that was purposeful, that in these two cases, I know we're not to 5 yet, we're going in order, that we didn't rework to a more positive wording. I didn't have that to offer, but I didn't know if that was something that had come up, why these particular policies remained in the shall not language.
Yeah, in the lead-in paragraph. Yeah, I can see your question.
But these are actual, in this case, there's still restrictions on what the superintendent does. Because you don't want the superintendent doing anything unlawful, unethical, unsafe. So it is a prohibition.
But I think it's more the shall not language, meaning.
So could it still, like the superintendent
Will not.
will take reasonable measures
Yeah.
to prevent any practice? Now, again, I know you guys did more research, but for me, those stuck out to me instead of like.
Yeah, well, particularly on OE5 is clearer because OE1 does have the fail to, but OE5 is just the superintendent shall not allow any financial activity or condition that deviates from the budget. It's a prohibition. OE1 is a prohibition for causing or allowing, but then the reasonable measures is a positive. So that one's a little tricky. I believe again that this is language comparable to what the other districts used. But I do take your point.
Can I ask a clarifying question, which made me want to wonder something? So yes, should not break the law, right? Should not do things that make people unsafe or students or staff and anything that's unethical. So those are that sounds like a bright line to me, very clear, do not, or shall not. But for inequitable, disrespectful, or imprudent, if we were to lump that together, that feels like take any reasonable measure too, right? So maybe there's even a difference between the different words within the sequence of words. One is like, yes, don't break the law. The other is take every good measure to ensure that you are not being inequitable and the system is not creating inequity. So maybe there's a bifurcation, which would be very different from other districts as well. But that might be what I'm toggling with in my brain as I'm hearing you speak.
Yeah, because the operating expectations do have shall and or will and will not in most of them, not all of them, but most of them have sections the superintendent will, the superintendent will not. Now, this one does still have the shall not fail to, which jars our ears.
Yeah.
But I think in this context, I would say it's okay. But if you want us to try to re-wordsmith it, we can.
And in my mind, again, I can tell you if I broke the law or not, but I can't tell you if someone perceives something disrespectful when another person perceived it as respectful. So that's where I think there's a difference for me with the will versus will nots.
And there's a certain point where we can't just say the superintendent won't allow any of this to happen, because things happen. And so what you really want is the superintendent will take all possible steps to prevent these things from happening.
Yes, Director Moraldo.
Because I think it is important to have certain things that are a prohibition, right? So I can be lawful 99% of the time. I'm lawful. But what we're saying is never be unlawful. So I think it is important that we have the prohibition piece, but I do like the bifurcation of some of the things of, is there a line where, like, don't fail to, take these reasonable measures to avoid these things, as opposed to, and also act in this way.
I think I've heard enough about that. I want to pull that one out so we can work on that one more. So I think that one, I would not recommend we move forward at this point.
Well, I mean, your other option is you can move the package forward as a conversion to coherent governance with the note that we're not done playing with a particular policy. It's up to you.
Great. OE5, if we're going in order. It's not on the list. It's on Sid. It's on Director Moline's.
Yes, it's on my
OE5.
list. It was the same. It was the same question about, and again, I'm okay if it's purposeful. It just felt, yeah. So this one shall not cause or allow. This is, yeah.
I would agree with Suzanne. I think this one is purposeful and probably an appropriate place. That this is pretty strong language consistent with board direction over the history of time as being a very financially conservative district. That these would probably be a bright line that we would.
I'm okay with that.
Expect.
Yeah,
so I think that strong language. I think would reflect the board value.
I want to make sure.
But I think you bring up a good point. I think OE1, we have work to do to, all those things in a line are not all the same.
Is there any other wording we could use though with this? Just throwing it out there, because we other than shall not, unless we think as a board there's not. Because I think Director Mullings has a point. I mean, if we're trying to remove it altogether, could we just think about how I'm fine with keeping it, but it is an interesting point. It is in there. We're taking it out everywhere else. Seems we could reword it differently.
I think we're taking over, just to be clear, we're taking everywhere else where we then go and enumerate lists of things. And so if we look at the bold, it's really to offer the highlighting and difference of the superintendent, what they will and what they will not do. I think for this as the lead-in paragraph, I think would really highlight and argue how strongly the board feels about this, which I think in the context of what we're seeing happening in Marysville is really, I think it's the line in the sand that we're drawing. That's a really clear line that not all boards have. And I think for me in that context, I would feel a little uncomfortable to remove the strength of the language.
And I'm okay with that. And I think that this conversation was all I just wanted to make sure is that it's purposeful and it's meaningful and it's bright line. And I do agree on both of these. There's bright lines to be drawn. I just didn't want it to pass by and not say, is it intentional that we keep them in this way? So I'm okay with us keeping it in this context.
Other commentary on OE5? Okay, then we'll go to OE8.
I did have a 6. I have an OE6.
OE6.
I did have an OE6, which is really minor, which is just from a readability perspective. And of course, I don't have the full version in front of me. It is number 1. I'd just love to add commas. I wrote enough in my note. So number 1, I'd love to add commas. So it's ensure, comma, to an adequate level, comma, against theft, Like just reading it without
Okay.
commas for me, I was insured on adequate level against theft. That was just a harder read for me, but I felt like if we could put commas around to an adequate level, that helped me with the readability of that sentence.
That works.
That was my very minor. I also just wanted to make sure everybody knew I did go through every single. Even
I
if
think
it's
that's
not
the reason
present
why we're
last
bringing
week.
OE6 to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I felt, because I missed it, I felt really important that I went through every single one and every single word and paid attention, because you guys did such great work
Yeah.
last time when I was sick. So thank you.
I would expect nothing less. Okay. OE8. Number 13. Or did I miss a?
I thought OE 11 was,
It's number 13. It
Yeah.
was professional support and now it's support and or information necessary.
I think I misread it. I think it's OE8.13.
Yes, no,
Yes.
he had it up there.
Okay, yeah, I was just,
There.
I was lost in pages.
We're on OE8.
Yeah, OE8,
Oh, he did.
line 13, which was to now say in that yellow highlighted. So to make the change to say provide support and or information necessary for the board to perform its advocacy and community engagement role. Okay. Everyone okay with that? OE11, number 1 and number 2, you see changes in blue, which I will read. OE11, number 1, ensure that all policies and procedures regarding discipline are restorative in nature, culturally responsive, collaboratively developed, including teachers, administrators, students, and the community, when possible, appropriately communicated to students and parents, and enforced consistently using reasonable judgment. Number 2, address any behaviors that disrupt learning. And then we are on to the back side. The superintendent will not. And then it's A. Also read 7A. So permit student behaviors that disrupt learning or that are disrespectful or dangerous, either on school property or at school-sponsored events. Prohibited behaviors include A, the use of alcohol, tobacco products, or other illegal drugs. Okay. And now we're going on to OE15, number 4. And it was simply a typo correction to read establish expectations for use of technology by staff and students. Other board comment after taking this through a second time and letting it marinate? Okay, well, I'll pause on final board reflections. I'll take, is there any public comment in the room or on Zoom about second read of all of these policies? Wow, you guys have done amazing, wonderful work. We are so, so grateful. And I think I would feel most comfortable with us just holding on OE1, because I think it's going to take more time, and I would like to not move it forward just because I think it's going to be reworked enough. It would send the message of like we're just turfing things to August, versus I would ask that we have a motion that approves all of our policies except for OE1 at this time, and that we may be able to bring this forward to a third read on a future meeting before, but because I think it's going to require some conversation between the two of you and our superintendent and board. And I think what I've heard is we want to separate it into sort of the bright line things and the. Yes. So I think that all the feedback I've heard makes sense, and I would recommend that it's going to require more work that I would like actually to get done before August, because again, these are all still things we want to move forward for language change and have August be the substantive change conversation. And this really isn't substantive. I mean, it's substantive in words, but not in intent. Director Moraldo.
So I was trying to be clear, were you hoping for a motion tonight?
I was.
Because the board agenda says no board action anticipated. So we told the public we would not be taking action.
Oh. Well, that's unfortunate.
Now, we did not receive any feedback from the public regarding this. So I don't know if this is something we would feel comfortable moving forward with to take action, but I think because we told the public we weren't going to take action, maybe this could be on the consent agenda for the July meeting.
I would feel comfortable putting all those minus OE1 on the consent agenda for July if the board would feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Agreed.
See, look at me bringing problems and solutions.
We have one question, which is, assuming that this does move forward, may we go ahead with the reformatting of all of them into the format that we presented at the last meeting?
I don't see why I wouldn't. I think that would be great.
I just want to see the heads nod because it's a lot of work. We only want to do it once. And when I say we, I'm
Right, and that unless there's any feedback from the administration over the format or how, because they will become the owners of these documents. So that would be a consideration in what they would like to do.
Consistent formatting is something we've been striving for and making small steps towards. And this will be a big step forward. So thank you.
Okay.
I thought we had you on retainer for like another decade.
We're gonna need a bigger contract.
Already.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your work. Certainly, I don't think that you need to come to our July meeting when it's on consent. But you're always welcome to as a public member. But we would like to see OE1 modified. And so maybe I'll put that in our superintendent's bucket first for you to sort of highlight what language you would recommend and then kick it over to the board. And if you would just keep Ann and Suzanne on that email thread, and I will task Director Moraldo and Mullings, so that way there's only 2 board members on that email thread. So if you would, the 2 of you with our superintendent and the 2 of you.
Yeah,
and
that
then
that sounds like a great way to do it.
we will
We
avoid,
get to a consensus much quicker
correct.
by involving the board, because that definitely involves the board to make that kind of a language change.
Yes.
And that way having the 2 to work with would be great.
I accept that appointment.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Which brings us to formerly item 3, the superintendent annual evaluation. Am I doing the right order still?
Yep.
Okay.
I move the board accept the annual summative evaluation of the superintendent, board superintendent linkage -5E as presented.
Second.
And while we get forward to do this, remember, we will actually have to modify and amend that, what you just made, because we did just finalize E1 and E4. And so you may recall that what is attached to the agenda was what was to date prior to the board packet being sent, which those were incomplete. So we will reflect and ask that as we get to the end of this conversation, that is amended to reflect where 1 and 2 or 1 and 4 have been accepted by the board. So this is an exciting moment, and like graduation and this time of year and all the reflections, we really get a moment to appreciate our superintendent. And I know you have a big team behind you, but this is a moment for us to acknowledge just the incredible breadth and depth of work and partnership that you have with the Board of Five in our community. And we wanted to take a moment to do that. So first, wanted to offer some highlights, and while there could be lists of 100, we'll start with just these few that rise to the top for us. So with that, I wanted to open up to my board colleagues to do that.
Thank you. I'll get us started. So I'll first start with extending my gratitude for your service to the district, and share as we gathered as a board some of start of the accomplishments that we discussed. So first, what I'd like to do is highlight our appreciation for your continuing to prioritize investments in our students' mental health resources through renegotiating the ISD relationship with Swedish, launching assistance for access to services through Care Solace. I'd like to call out the strong work done in the board committee, the bond committee member recruitment, the meeting structure, facilitated process that created a collaborative environment for robust stakeholder input and consensus building. As we saw on display tonight, the ongoing implementation of the strategic plan and how that's taking hold within our district and producing wonderful outcomes already, and we'll continue to look at that. Also for introducing a dialogue for the future implementation of equity-based budgeting, and certainly for the investment of time and the onboarding of our new board members and really helping them ramp up so quickly. So thank you.
Right. Well, I also want to start by extending my gratitude to Superintendent Talyuk. It's been wonderful to get to know you over the last several months. And thank you again as one of the new board members for all of your help with onboarding. It was wonderful. So thank you. And continued help. It's never ending. So to start off, I want to highlight the thoughtful and transparent budget development over several months that's listed board input and did not require a reduction in force or building closures, which is big. So I want to really applaud you for that great work. Also managing our audit findings, transparent process, and a proactive work with the state auditors, and again, applaud you for really leading through that effort with Martin Turney and others. So thank you for that. Launching and expanding the school breakfast program, also, critical program in our district, and then connecting to network of outside leaders, sharing ideas, taking in new concepts. I've been very impressed with the networking that you do with other superintendents, other leaders, both locally and then also across the country too, in both the role as a mentor and as a mentee. So hats off to you on that.
Thank you so much for this year and all the work you've done. And wanted to highlight some 5 areas that I'm particularly grateful for. Your continued engagement in the ASU GSV with cohort of board members, cabinet members, and principals, as well as community members, that encourages outside learning opportunities. The focus on completing the 2018 capital levy projects with frequent, transparent reporting. Rehiring of high school teacher techs, theater techs that allow ISD students to have the best experience with theater as possible and allow for community access to our facilities. Continued implementation of universal design for learning work to support all our students. Have a special heart for that. Increasing engagement opportunities such as relaunching special services parent advisory committee. So I appreciate all that work.
We're in the home stretch. Thank you. It has been a great pleasure getting to know you and to work with you. And I really cannot thank you enough for the countless hours you and your staff have spent with me and Director Coyne in getting us up to speed. So really appreciate all that. Also, thank you for investing in the board connections, which is appreciated through our attendance at the WASDA meetings, NSBA, and after our board meetings. Thank you for your focus on improving the cabinet member presentations at board meetings and our work study sessions. That's been really very helpful. Progress on secondary innovation options have been great. I know a ton of research has gone into that. And you've been very thoughtful about the programming options that you've brought forward. So thank you. And then lastly, talent recruitment. Kudos really for the 3.1% increase in our teachers of color. Really appreciate all the work.
And we could go on, but we do want to get out at a reasonable time tonight. That will show value to our superintendent. I wanted to pause at this time and ask if there's any input in the room or on Zoom. I will just add, we highlight all the amazing things that you're doing and continue to do. I think one of the things that we haven't captured here is it's been great this year to partner with you and see how open the dialogue is as you come into your second year, and I think become more comfortable in your role, and the responsiveness to feedback and the immediate changes that happen with just even how you communicate with us, from like when we have a conversation to then the Friday update and how different it looks, to being able to have open dialogue about the challenges, because we know that our district, while amazing, isn't perfect, and we can really lean into those conversations and feel like we can have really challenging conversations and dialogue in such collaborative way. And I think that is a huge part of what sets Issaquah apart, is for us to be able to do that as a team of 6. And we really have appreciated you leaning into that role and being more comfortable with that role in your second year. So other thoughts that we had, and any other reflections?
There's been a lot of work. I think especially tonight, it was highlighted just how robust it has been through the strategic plan, and that it's been deliberate, I think, is a really important thing I'd like to focus in on. So with that, I would like to say something. I move to amend the motion to include the acceptance. Wait, not yet?
No, I wanted to have a chance for our superintendent if
Okay.
you had any comments or reflections, because once you do that, then
I'm
we're
sorry,
done.
it's
So
not
yeah, I know.
So I'll say 3 things. One is all of the items that were mentioned are beyond just me, and it is our cabinet team, our administrators, and many people across our system who are working and rowing together to be able to prioritize the things that matter most to accelerate student learning and well-being, and to ensure our staff are well equipped to do that. And while we're not perfect, it allows us to focus on things that are popping up the most and set in motion the immediate steps for support, but also think through what's the big dream that we want to get to, and be able to take those steps together in ways that are sustainable, even though they might be step by step. But that's the best way, I think. My theory of action for change is that if you do it together and also step by step, it will be much more sticky in the future and yield results. The second is we had a changeover in the board in terms of the composition and then roles and different positions. And so for me, it's great to be able to work with people in different ways, and that helps me get to know people on the board and to be part of that, team together. So I really appreciate the distributed leadership that exists within the Issaquah School Board. That's not the practice everywhere. And then there's also both being able to find the time to get to know people on an individual level, whether it's through conferences or informal times or school visits or one-to-one meetings, just to catch up on a couple of other items as well. And then finally, this week marks literally, I gave the keys away. I did not. My husband gave the keys away today to our house. So we have consolidated our apartment in Issaquah, and now we have a house in Issaquah. And so we've gotten rid of some things, but we have to get rid of many more things. But we are firmly rooted now in our home, although everything's still in boxes for the most part. And I found my utensils last night at 1 a.m., which was necessary because I would not be at home today, so my family could eat. so we're very invested in this community. I'm excited to be not only the superintendent of the organization, but also to be on this journey together with my family and to experience the system as a parent and a family member and caregiver. So really excited about that. And there's more to come. I have lots of big, exciting thoughts, and so does my team. And I know you do as well. And we're here to partner together. So thank you.
Director Marlowe, before you read that or the modification that you're going to make, maybe it'd be helpful also just for the record, the parts of what we're approving, because it's very interesting that our motion is just to accept the monitorings and the annual summary evaluation, but in that is specific language talks about contract extension. So that would be helpful to maybe read out before we make the modification.
So annually and by law, in accordance with RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, close paren G, close paren, the board must evaluate the performance of the superintendent. Board action is anticipated. And so I'm not sure, did you want me to read these other bottom pieces?
I
think that's all,
I'll
just
read
in
it.
accordance with. Okay, I did it.
Is when you open it up in the BSL 5E, it says, based on the board's prior acceptance of these reports that were all enumerated above, and the ongoing monitoring of the organizations and the superintendent's performance during the preceding year, the board reaches the following conclusions relative to the superintendent performance. The board is satisfied with Ms. Talyuk's leadership of the district for the academic year 2023-24, specifically including the aforementioned performance results. Based on the foregoing conclusions, the board makes the following recommendations and decisions for the coming year. The board hereby proposes to extend the superintendent's contract by 1 additional year for a total of 3 years. I just want to make sure that people understood when we were voting to accept the superintendent's annual evaluation, that was the essential component. Sorry.
Thank you. I didn't have the actual evaluation pulled up at the time, so that language is not on the board agenda. So my apologies. But I would like to now move to amend the motion to include the acceptance of E1 mission on June 27th, 2024, with a board disposition of meets reasonable progress, and E4 life management and personal awareness on June 27th, 2024, with a board disposition of meets reasonable progress.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendment? Already, all those in favor of the amendment, I have to do the amendment first?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, and so now we can vote on the amended motion to accept the superintendent annual evaluation. Yes? Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? We are grateful for all that you have done and all that you are going to continue to do for students in this class. Thank you.
And Bethany, I've sent you the language that the amendment language, so you don't have to.
And now that takes us to item update pro/con statements for the ballot proposition.
Great. I'll pass this one to Martin Turney, but we'll just share that we are, as we move forward with the next steps for the bond initiative, we are excited to continue to help the school board prepare for that and our community as well. So Martin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. So now that we have filed the resolution with King County Elections and it will be on the ballot on November 5th, we are required to put out notifying the public of a pro and con committee that would consist of it's limited to 3 members. So we just wanted to make sure information wise, everyone knew. We had another chance in public to mention that we sent out a notification on the 21st of June. It's listed on the website under announcements, under the legal notices, and we shared it out on Facebook and Instagram. We've had a couple of folks respond already, but we wanted to make sure everybody knew where that was and that it was out there. We will collect these until July 3rd, 5 o'clock. and then tally up what we received. And then the plan would be at the July 11th meeting. Those names would be on the consent agenda for board approval. So again, just wanted to get that information out and make sure the public heard it at this regular meeting. And if there are any questions, I can answer.
Especially for our newest board members. Any questions about this in the process? Okay. Can you remind us from 2022, did we have statements on both sides?
We did.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no further comments, I appreciate that. I will accept any public comment about this topic in the room or on Zoom. No. Right. Next item is legislative matters.
Nothing at this point, continuing to work with some of our legislative reps in the region to set up 2 meetings, actually, with 2 different groups of folks to have just those conversations about where we think our commonalities are and the issues facing our districts and how we want to work with our legislators. So there'll be more to come, but it looks like the first one of those meetings is going to be July 8th or 9th, and I will report out.
Federally, this week is actually the Congress is beginning to look at budgets for the 2025 fiscal year. The House is looking at significant cuts to education like they did last year, whereas the Senate is taking a much more moderate approach. Leaders in the Senate are concerned about some of the current caps amongst all of domestic programs that could impact K-12, and so how they might even be limited. I'm always concerned when it says cuts because in Washington, D.C., a cut can often be a cut to growth. So like you're not going to grow as much as you thought you were, or so I never know what they mean by cuts. If it's actual less than last year or just not as much as we thought it was going to be. But that is going on now, and I think that's going to be a fight through the remainder of the year.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from, no, anything from your team? No. Okay. Thank you. We appreciate having experts and staying engaged for all of the advocacy work that this board does. So thank you. Our next item is announcements and correspondence. Is there any additional announcements and correspondence?
I was going to make a note earlier during graduation, the graduation conversation, but I also wanted to recognize all the 5th grade move up ceremonies and the 8th grade graduations too. I heard wonderful feedback. I had an 8th grader. I knew you had an 8th grader. I was at the Pine Lake one. I know you were at the Pacific Cascade one. It was fun for that group in particular because with those 8th graders, we didn't get the 5th grade move up. And I know obviously for our seniors didn't get the 8th grade graduation either. So a lot of first time experiences, but I wanted to share that because those were all fun too across the district.
Thank you. Next item is calendar and future agenda topics. And we'll just lead off by saying the monitoring calendar, I'm assuming you've looked at it, notice a couple of changes moving up, however you want to look at it, so that we will monitor ends 3 and ends 4 earlier in the time frame, and that way we will then monitor ends 1 the first meeting in June. The intention for this is to make sure that by the time we start meeting to do the superintendent evaluation, we will have heard all of the ends except for ends 1, and then we will monitor ends 1 before we come to this meeting so that there'll be more time, less pressure, and that we will have heard the full sort of depth and breadth prior to us starting our evaluation process. Were there other specific things?
Nope, there's just the changes of moving ends 3 and ends 4 up, as well as then also after hearing today's discussion about ends 1 and the timing, I just want to leave that open in case the board had a different feeling about that, because we only placed it here this year because it was the first time doing it originally.
So would you like a motion?
That would be great.
I move the board adopt the policy governance monitoring calendar for the 2024-25 school year as presented. Additional action to be determined by board discussion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this, specifically the positioning of ends one, since this was the first time monitoring, so it is an addition, not a small or insignificant one at that. So I know, as I mentioned earlier, I was talking with the superintendent and we were thinking where does it belong best? But that was pre-seeing the monitoring report. For me, as reflective it is and the having it, for me, I believe it nests nicely at the end of the school year, but I'm open to.
I agree. Yeah,
Like it.
I think it's a nice accumulation.
I also like that it gives us one board meeting. If for some reason we were to ask staff to bring it back, it can still happen just prior to the approval of the superintendent evaluation.
Yes. Are there any other discussion points? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Alrighty. Also, you'll notice, thank you, Bethany, for all your work, and you think that we are tough to coordinate and organize. I appreciate all the things you're doing with further getting onto agendas and calendars for bond conversations with our city councils. And so we're working on finishing those just so you have visibility to that. I'm going to be working on putting together that presentation soon. And I wanted to hand out drafts of the retreat,
Great.
which is in August. So you start to get a sense of how we're putting together. You'll notice that we're working on figuring out where finance is going to fit in. And part of the unknown is we've tasked our students to do some work before they come to us for we are asking them to provide suggested edits to governance policies with regard to student advisory vote, as well as the procedures for how they actually would take voices of 8 and put it into one and want them to actually mechanically, like, explicitly have that prepared before we move forward with that. And so we'll have a clearer picture as we get closer to August where they are in that work. But do note that the items that are mentioned about digital or social media, that conversation about social media, digital citizenship, cell phone policy, as well as finance will fit into the agenda at some point. But there gives you a skeleton about what it is framing up to look like. So you have a sense ahead of time. I would ask, just like with, especially because of this now over this next week, let's say through next Friday, if you would take the substantive changes and recommendations you want for board policy to me by Friday, like a week from tomorrow, because we need to make sure that our consultants have time in case so I would love a policy recommendation change plus a little one sentence on your why. Because that way they may need time to cross-reference with other school districts or any other parts that may be helpful to the conversation and to provide historical or background context. So that's in your homework to do by Friday. After that, it may not make it onto this year's agenda for changes for policy. The second thing is now that you've seen that framework, if you have adverse reaction to any of the topics or specific questions that you want to make sure get elevated in that discussion, that would also be helpful for me to hear by Friday. So it's just like quick reflections is all I would need. You'll notice in there we have a linkage set up with King County Council members.
Yeah, great.
And so that is also part of legislative advocacy. And so as we get closer to that, certainly Director Taylor, you can connect with them and however you want, but we've gotten that set up because that was part of what we're doing. And then you also see we probably need one more copy. So they need this copy actually. We have a copy for them.
There's an
to
extra
know
one here. There's
where
one.
you're penciled in,
Oh.
as well as we're trying to balance having the student part for potential sustainability policy. You'll see that, and it's again try to be thoughtfully connected to the work for governance and any updates for governance, as well as a lunch that you would be invited to stay for with the board as well as students. So trying to put all together so you're like, oh, just one chunk of a day rather than over 2 days. But you're welcome for 2 days as well. So, okay. So again, trying to sort of put all the pieces together, and gratitude to Bethany and our superintendent for all the work that's gone in to do this. And I know that these are just, again, words, few sentences that that will reflect a lot of work for your team to prepare for. And so you wanted to have these early. I think those are the only updates I have. Anything else that I missed on that specifically, superintendent, for the retreat?
Did I miss, maybe it's my memory, did I miss us saying yes to the motion that was made? Did we actually vote? Okay.
For the monitoring calendar?
Yeah, I just don't remember saying yay.
Okay. Already. And then we're not, we have nothing about this that we have to approve tonight because this is just sending you a very early draft. Yes, Director Moore.
So these city council linkages, you're gonna go to that next?
So they're not, linkages is probably the wrong word. It's where I will go and start the roadshow of bond presentation at their meeting.
Okay, but
So-
you're individually planning on I didn't know if you
Oh, okay.
needed us to
I wasn't
pick
sure.
this up, but
Okay.
you're taking.
Sorry, thank you for that
okay.
clarification.
You need help
If-
with it, or you have a?
No, if I need help, I will,
Okay.
you will hear from me.
Okay,
Awesome.
okay.
Yeah, so sorry. Thank you for that clarification. But we're wanting to make sure.
If I know the one that I'm living in might be a little more prickly, would you want backup?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, anyone is welcome. Just we want you just to know and have that visibility. So yes, put it on your calendars. Would love for as much backup as possible, and much conversation you can have pre-council starting meeting is usually how it works. So yes, please do that. But don't feel like, wow, I have to come and prepare to talk, because that's not the expectation, unless you hear from me. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. Any other calendaring future agenda topics? No. So I think we've heard for the July meeting, we're gonna bring forward onto consent a couple things that may ultimately be pulled off consent. So one is the pro con. So again, just because we have planned a consent only agenda, please don't feel pressured to not pull things off the consent agenda. My request would be that you let Bethany, Heather, and I know sometime before 10 a.m. Ideally not 9:59. And then the board policies will be on consent. So it's going to be quite a big consent agenda. And that's okay. I feel like for when it gets to the third time, I don't have a problem with that. So I think that's it. Anything else?